Hello, and welcome to my webinar. My name is Marlysa Raye-Jacobus, and I'm your guest speaker. I'm really excited to be here. We have so much to cover about our very interesting and complex topic concerning wildlife, your immediate environment, and how you can coexist with the creatures that surround you. So let's begin. For a webinar to be successful, we have some items to share with you. First off, you'll be muted. I'm the only one that gets to talk right now. So please be aware of that. You can click on the Q&A box, which everybody can see at the bottom. I will address your questions at the end. My topic is very full, so I would like to respond to any of your questions at the very end. And finally, the most important thing is to please fill out the survey at the end. It's important that we hear from you. We want to know how well you liked or didn't like this, the talk, and suggestions for future classes. So who are we, these Master Gardeners? Well, we're part of a national program as well as a statewide program. And since I live in North Fulton, within the city of Milton, I am a North Fulton Master Gardener. We're a Georgia nonprofit organization, and we're only a small fraction of the total Georgia Master Gardeners, and even a smaller fraction of the national effort. Our purpose as an all-volunteer organization is to provide horticulture and ecology education to any of its members and the people of Fulton County. We also assist the UGA Cooperative Extension Service in Fulton County by providing all different types of classes and education gardens. We have several different demonstration gardens in North Fulton, which I encourage you to go visit. And we also provide horticultural scholarships. We make money so that we can do that. This is the garden lecture series, and I am number 8 on the list of 10 altogether. I hope you've tuned into some of the previous ones because I have, and they're very, very interesting and informative to Fulton County residents. And if you have any information about these classes, you can turn to the very bottom link and access any of the previous classes on our YouTube Master Gardeners website. And of course, you can follow us on social media. Where would we be without social media? Our presentations are found on all of the usual suspects, and there's the list right there. Bear in mind that this class is being recorded, and you'll get a follow-up email because you have registered for this. We still want you to provide a survey, and that's part of the reason why we have a follow-up survey. So a little bit about myself. Once again, my name is Marlysa Raye-Jacobus, and I've been a Master Gardener for 25 years. I'm also a part-time residential garden consultant and have done many speaking engagements for the North Fulton Master Gardeners Speakers Bureau. I have enjoyed playing in the dirt since I was about, 6 to 8 years old, and my husband and I have owned 6 houses in 4 different states. I've lived and gardened here in Atlanta since 1997. And one of the reasons why I chose this topic is because of the fact that I've had to confront and conquer 25 different critters since living here since 1997. Are you ready for it? Here we go. I have the list. You can count on your fingers if you like, but it's true. I've had, as I said, my husband and I have both had to confront and conquer the following wildlife, both inside and outside our home. They are carpenter bees, honeybees, and that was 2 years in a row that we had to hire beekeepers to evict the new bee hive. Flying squirrels, eastern gray squirrels, woodpeckers, sapsuckers, wasps, hornets, yellow jackets, lady beetles, carpet beetles, silverfish, termites, ants, both inside and out, and they come every single year, usually about the second week of April. Earthworms, centipedes, millipedes, several varieties of spiders, both poisonous and non-poisonous, I may add, roof rats, mice, opossums, ducks, cardinals, frogs, and yes, even non-venomous snakes. Luckily, they've been outside. So now it's time to talk about our agenda. This is important to me because it keeps me on task, and there's a lot to cover. The term and paradigm of wildlife versus critters is our first conversation. Next will be a rather scientific conversation about the food chain and the food web basics. If you've ever taken any high school biology, you probably have dealt with that. Excuse me. The third one is a biggie, and this is an important feature that I want you to keep remembering. I'm going to pester you about this because you're going to hear the words integrated pest management several times, otherwise known as IPM. Next item is what an organism needs to survive and thrive. And basically, there are 4 criteria that we will review on a regular basis when we talk about these organisms. And that includes water, food, shelter, and a safe place to have their babies. The organisms are critical within we will talk about the organisms that are critical within the urban as well as suburban environment. I'm assuming you live in either an urban or suburban environment rather than a farm vast area. I'm also going to include what we call middle ground organisms, or what I call middle ground organisms, that sort of don't fall in the same category. But mostly I will be talking specifically about special or different creatures that you have been involved with and have had to deal with within your property or within your home. Each time we're going to talk about critter management, basically IPM methods rather than using heavy-duty chemicals or annihilating the critters. And the last thing we're going to talk about is, as a follow-up, are 7 different IPM practices and how to have that overall healthy yard, and yet have it still being appealing to you. First off, here's the paradigm. 3 gorgeous pictures. The first one's a deer. Isn't he or she beautiful? That's a baby, a fawn. But he just ate all my tulips. Oh my gosh, Bambi ate my plants. The second one is a common garter snake. He looks ominous. Scary. But snakes eat rodents. They eat lots and lots of rodents, which we'll talk about. Oh, and here we are on a timely basis, right before the Easter bunny shows up with a cute little bunny with a little white tail. That rabbit just ate my black-eyed Susan. What am I going to do? There's our dilemma, and there's our paradigm. We like a lot of these creatures, but they don't always act accordingly to what we need them to do. This is a slide that I think is a very important message that an American Indian by the name of Chief Seattle stated 167 years ago in 1854. The statement is, the earth does not belong to us, we belong to the earth. And it's really, really important to remember that. He's the one who developed this notion. And Native American Indians were very, very useful to any of the colonists that came afterwards, because they were here before we were. I want my listeners to recognize that every organism has a purpose or a function within that natural cycle of life. Humans are the ones that need to manage and protect the species. This will prevent future creatures and plants from becoming extinct. Extinction is a big word that we are looking at all the time now. But the big question is, number one, how much can plants sustain our wildlife and humans when humans are eroding the environment? Humans are destroying our plants and wildlife. And if we add more plants and use the right plants or choose those right plants, will it support the food web and our wildlife? Will it be sustained? Let's decide on that shortly. As I promised, this is the food chain. This is very simplistic as a viewpoint, but it also gets to the point of explaining very, very easily. It's a simplistic concept. Everything living is dependent upon the sun. The sun allows the leaves to photosynthesize. So everything starts from the sun, and the plants start to grow from the sun. So there's the grass, which is called a producer. After the next item is the primary consumer, which we have a picture of a grasshopper. It could be any insect. Insects eat plants. The secondary consumer is a bird. So birds and small creatures eat insects or plants. And then after that is a tertiary consumer. There's the dreaded snake. He looks very, very scary, and he eats the bird or other things. Larger birds will eat smaller birds. So he's a tertiary consumer. And then finally, there's a predator. He's at the apex or the top level of the food chain. He eats the snake. And he's a very, there are owls, there are hawks, there are wolves, there are coyote. Those are the high level of predators. But yet, there's us. Of course, the ultimate predator is the human being. So there you go. And after the human being, what happens is everything decomposes. The cycle starts all over again after the predator decomposes, and eventually the cycle begins again, back to the earth. So ashes to ashes, dust to dust. You've heard that statement. It's kind of the same. This too is a simplistic form of what we just talked about with the food chain. It's just shown in an energy pyramid form, and it has the same basic concepts. And once again, humans are at the tippy top of the food chain, so just be aware of that. And the energy pyramid is important. We are what we call domesticated omnivores. The information on the right is really what I call my middle ground creatures. And I wanted to document that so you understand that they also have a major part of this energy triangle as well. Things like, and I don't even have that marked down, vultures and beavers and skunks and lizards, Canada geese, woodpeckers, sapsuckers are also included. They have good and bad sides to them. It's a subjective terminology, though, as to why we allow them or don't allow, why we like them within the food chain cycle. But all these creatures have an important role in the dynamics of the pyramid, but we don't have any more time to discuss that. We'll focus on the creatures that you may encounter in your residence. Here it is, what I promised, the integrated pest management. If you don't remember anything else in this presentation, consider this slide as the most important one for your future actions. This is about managing the critters. You have within your power the ability to utilize certain practices in order to maintain your neck of the woods. So what is IPM? We're going to read this together. It's an important definition. It's a little complicated sounding, but stay with me. Integrated pest management, otherwise known as IPM, is a sustainable, science-based decision-making process that combines biological, cultural, physical, and chemical tools to identify, manage, and reduce risk from pests and pest management tools and strategies in a way that minimizes overall economic, health, and environmental risks. This comes directly from the IPM Institute. You can refer to that, and there's much more information on the website. The 4 features about IPM are, to the right, the habit modification, different categories, where you alter the environment to make it less attractive to the critters. In other words, you let them go out on their own. You exclude, and that means providing fence or any kind of home repairs or barriers for any critter to enter. You provide repellents. There are different kinds of repellents that are very acceptable, but you have to use the correct repellents to discourage nuisance wildlife. Always, always, always read the label. Once you read the label, read it again. The label is the law, as they say. And the 4th last resort is lethal control. I suggest that you always consult and or call or use a licensed professional wildlife control company if it gets to that point. In other words, the encouragement and prevention of the organisms around your property are within your realm to manage. This is the crux of my conversation with you today. So let's move on. Here we go, the ugliest critter in the world. And we shall begin with the most despised critter. I thought that this was appropriate. Everyone has to deal with mosquitoes, no matter where it is that you live. It may be a short-lived or it may be long-lived. Even if you don't have very many mosquitoes, you'll have different kinds of flies. They're kind of one and the same. Here's the good part about mosquitoes that I want you to understand. They provide food for many species. They help process dead matter for plant life to thrive. That's a good thing. They get rid of the waste, so to speak. Pollinators. Well, you've heard that word pollinators many times, but they are excellent pollinators as one of very many other pollinators, and they're very busy. They also produce their mosquito larvae, which are eaten by many fish and different aquatic life, such as frogs and ducks. And the elimination of mosquitoes would have a huge adverse effect on the ecosystem. But we hate them. It's just like seeing the snake, but we hate them. What a nuisance they are. We all know that story about DDT in the 60s and how streets were fogged all the time. Now there's mosquito control companies, and their spray may kill even existing mosquitoes, but eventually they'll return. So you have to remember that the mosquitoes companies are out to make sure that the mosquitoes don't return. It may also cause problems to your plants, so be aware of that. Caution is the word. So how do we deal with mosquito treatments? To use mosquito treatments with IPM in mind, first of all, look to the left and you see the breeding ground. This is a very ugly picture of this breeding ground. You take away their habit, which is standing water. Generally speaking, they have to have their habitat, their habitat. You have to take away this ugly habitat, such as old tires, this lovely toilet, old containers, old bicycles, old grills, old cars. It looks like a very neglected, empty lot, doesn't it? Here's a second version too. English ivy. It's found prolifically in the Atlanta area. We master gardeners call ivy a virtual mosquito hotel. It's a nasty invasive vine that chokes out the good guys, which means other plant material. So make sure that you get rid of your ivy as much as you can. You see these ivy is climbing up trees. It's going to eventually choke out the trees from the bottom standpoint, from the root system, as well as the bark element as well. And mosquitoes love to hide in the ivy. It's a wonderful habit. Even mosquitoes that are ivy that's on the ground, they love to hide in it. So just be aware of that. What we do suggest to you is to use one of two. If you really have a big mosquito problem, we suggest to use the biological control or a repellent. And here's a picture of both of them, the mosquito dunks and mosquito beater. If you're hanging out in your backyard during early morning hours, around dusk or in the evening, you can just use, if you want, a topical spray treatment on your clothes and skin. I often will do that when I go out early in the morning and just spray my clothes, because that, and you don't have to do a heavy spray. Just a little bit goes a long way, but make sure that you have the back of your knees exposed, anything that's exposed, to give it a quick spray. You don't put these things on your skin at all. But talking about the dunks, the mosquito dunks, it has a bacteria called Bacillus thuringiensis. And the bacteria actually eats the larva. It's commonly known as BT, and it only has a 30-day effectiveness. So that's a great item to put into a bird bath to keep the birds don't care. They're not going to be harmed by the BT. It lasts 30 days, like your plug-in bathroom air freshener. So whenever you change that, you should change your dunks. Get rid of your dunks. They will decompose as time goes on. Also, there's a granular form, this mosquito beater, and I understand that it, from fellow master gardeners, that it works really well. I have a minimal amount of mosquitoes on my property, so I don't use that. You'll notice at the bottom, we put down the different types of oils that are in there. Those are more natural products. Be aware too that it only has about a 3-week shelf life, and it needs to be reapplied on a regular basis. When you buy this, you'll have to probably thin it down with water, mix it together. But these are good suggestions. This is a big topic, folks. So I want you to please be aware of this. We're going to spend a couple minutes on this one. And I want to talk about neonicotinoids, insecticides. They are not only blamed for bee decline, but neonicotinoid insecticides are used everywhere around the world. And they're the most widely used insecticide. And that includes 1/3 of all pesticide sales have neonicotinoid insecticides. We're afraid that basically any insecticide does kill many beneficial insects. It doesn't just kill the bad bugs, but it kills the good bugs. And be aware that bad bugs are minimal compared to the good bugs. As a matter of fact, I have a field guide to show that. Here's a Max field guide. You can buy this yourself. And one side says, the field guide to good garden bugs of the Southeast. And on the back, it has the bad bugs. So they're in detail, and they're actually what their names are and how big they are. I highly recommend that, especially if you're teaching your children what are good bugs and bad bugs. It's a wonderful guide to use. But after the insecticide is sprayed, chemicals still remain in the seeds, in the leaves, in the water, soil, pollen, and nectar. That means that it's going to cause damage or problems to those insects who are foraging on your plants for pollen and nectar, for digging in the soil, for looking for water, sitting on top of leaves. It gets on their body parts. And chances are that you may see a decline in your plants to produce flowers. In regards to bees, the neuroactive part about neonicotinoids, you can hear the nicotine element in the word neonicotinoid. And we all know what nicotine does to humans. So imagine what it does to other insects. It affects the bee's nervous system very drastically, and eventually that bee may die or have paralysis because it hits the nervous system immediately. Neonicotinoids are accused right now of lowering the bee fertility and the resistance to disease. Bees are already dying from a couple other things, and this is just fuel to the fire, so to speak. It makes it even worse. Okay, now it's time to talk about bug zappers over here. Oops. You know, the bug zappers have been around for a long time, and bug zappers aren't really ecologically friendly. Maybe 20 years ago, almost every homeowner or every person who had a place to worry about bugs was hanging a bug zapper out. But they kill mostly the good bugs, and they're indiscriminate machines. It's estimated that less than 2% of all the flying insects killed in these zappers are female mosquitoes. Bear in mind that only female mosquitoes bite you. The male mosquitoes do not bite you. And remember that all of the insects in the insect world, out of all those insects, only 3 to 5% are considered the bad bugs. These insect casualties may number in the billions of the beneficial insects. Between the bug zappers and the use of insecticides, we are slaughtering our primary consumer. In other words, it's part of the food chain that we're messing up drastically. Let's move on to honeybees. I chose honeybees because most people can relate to them. And it's, mind you, bees are a topic in themselves. I do not have time to talk about bees. Maybe I will do that as a webinar another point in time. But I only plan on discussing honeybees because why? We like them most of the time. Honeybees don't sting you. They serve a very good purpose. The next slide will be the carpenter bees because of their destructive behavior to our homes. And the fact that carpenter bees just came out last week from their hiding places and their winter hibernation, it's very appropriate. Before I talk any more about honeybees, I want to let you know that, and I do not have this book, but there is a beautiful book put out by the Xerces Society, that's Xerces Society, called 100 Plants to Feed the Bees. I have seen it, and it's a beautiful book. The contents provide 100 common flowers, herbs, shrubs, and trees that support bees, moths, butterflies, and hummingbirds. It's very detailed information, and it's got incredibly good photography. The Xerces Society has put out other books. I know I've seen the one on hummingbirds, and it's just equally as beautiful. This particular book is 240 pages. Who would think that there would be so much about bees? But it's a great book. I highly recommend it. Now about honeybees. There are 3 mandates. I want to go into that really quickly. There are 3 mandates in order to attract bees. One is to pick the right plants for pollinators. The second thing is to protect them from pesticides. And the third thing is to provide abundant blooms for a total of 3 seasons. That means from spring through the fall. If you can find, and because of the fact that bees go into hibernation in the wintertime, you don't have to usually worry about winter flowers being attractive to bees because there are very few around, truthfully. The honey, the only bee, I'll read from my notes here. The only bee that makes honey suitable for human consumption is the honeybee. Honey is the only food that we use and cultivate from any insect at all. We also use beeswax, candles, and soaps from bees, from honeybees as well, but that's it. They're responsible for pollinating 90 plus agricultural crops. That means 1/3 of the global food supply. And did you know that there are 3,950 species of native bees in the United States? Bear in mind that honeybees are not native to Europe. They came along on a hitch on a ship years and years ago. The protected species is a very, very important feature. Bees are considered a protective species. If you have a problem, you call a beekeeper. In other words, if they set up shop and start a hive somewhere in the crack of your between your walls, you should call a beekeeper. If you contact an exterminator or pest control company, chances are they will kill the bees. At least the beekeepers will take them away and find a good home for them, or have another hive started by them. Once again, neonicotinoids are contributing to honeybee hives collapse syndrome. So please do not use those neonicotinoids. There is a UGAB publication reference, and I will just tell you what the number is. Bulletin 1456, and that's called Eco-Friendly Garden, Attracting Pollinators, Beneficial Insects, and Other Natural Predators. You can go to the extension information. It says extension.uga.edu. We'll have that. I believe that's on our references. And the other bee that we're going to talk about are carpenter bees, because almost everyone who owns a house has had to deal with carpenter bees. Here's the facts. Carpenter bees are large, same size as a bumblebee. Only the females can sting, but that rarely happens. They're busy mating and producing eggs inside their holes. They will try to scare you by flying close to you if you're near their nesting area, but otherwise they don't bother you. As I said, they don't sting. They're just big and look ungainly. They're excellent pollinators, however. Right now, the carpenter bees have come out of their holes from after being larvae, and they're ready to start pollinating and looking for pollination sites. They rear their young by excavating the holes in the wood to lay their eggs. Here's a hole right here, and it's a perfect hole too. It's about a 1/2 inch big. That's their entrance hole. And then they set up shop and produce these tunnels. Produce these tunnels all throughout. And one by one, the female bee plops a piece of an egg in each one of these little spots all throughout. But these are their little tunnels. They do prefer unpainted and or weathered wood, such as barnwood, and they prefer the softer varieties of wood, such as redwood, cedar, cypress, pine, and fir. When I grew up in coastal New Jersey, our house exterior was redwood, but we rarely had carpenter bees because the wood was stained out of necessity every 2 years. We lived on the shore. So they like the softer wood. It's easier for their strong mandibles to chew out a round hole. You'll see the hole maybe, and the sawdust on the ground. See the sawdust right there, down here? Oops, doing that. Right there is the sawdust. Sometimes you'll see it filter out. You'll actually watch the sawdust come out because they push the sawdust out in order to work hard. And they are hard workers, just like ants. Here's the IPM application I wanted to talk about. There's a picture on the left of the trap, and then how the bee falls down into the makeshift collector. But first thing you do is you spray the insecticide. It's usually the over-the-counter wasp and hornet spray. I want to caution you to do this very early in the morning or after dusk when bees are not active. Then you find the holes. First you find the holes, then you do the spray. The third thing is you plug the holes with a putty and or sealant. You've got to let the putty dry for up to 24 hours before you can do anything else. The carpenter bees will not tunnel into painted wood most of the time. I do recommend that if it's an exterior spot, which usually it is, that use a very thick kind of paint or use a second coat of paint. And then hang your traps near the old areas where the tunnels are. The traps can be bought in big box stores. They can be bought in small hardware stores. You can make your own on YouTube. They have all different kinds of methods to show you how to do that. And the trap is similar to one of like a yellow jacket because they have similar ones. Yellow jackets operate differently because they're more in the ground, but they still fly all over the place. In addition to traps, pyrethroid insecticides will repel future carpenter bee issues, but the homeowner still needs to be vigilant. These bees are very, very tenacious and will want to go back to where they started from in the beginning because they generally return to the same nesting area year after year after their period of winter hibernation. So here's the sequence one more time. Treat with insecticides. You wait a few days to allow bees to come into the contact with insecticides. You fill the holes and then you paint. And that's basically it. And you have to be very vigilant yourself. Not only are they vigilant, but you're going to have to be vigilant. And you will conquer this. And if you can't, call a pest control person. It'll cost you a lot of money, but they usually guarantee things for 30 to 60 days. Here's something we love. Everyone loves a butterfly. I love this poster, and years ago I did have this poster until it finally fell apart. It's a great colorful poster in person, but we love butterflies for their beauty and their gracefulness. They're an important organism in the food chain because they provide food for other organisms. They are a food source for many other organisms, and they're also excellent pollinators. What do butterflies need? They need four things: the food source, okay, which is nectar and sugar, and water from flowers. The second thing is water itself and mineral salts. The third thing is shelter for protection from the elements and from predators. And the fourth thing is specific plants for their larvae to feed on. You'll notice right here, there's a picture of a little caterpillar. There's one, here's the monarch caterpillar. The butterflies are astute enough through years of trial and error of placing their eggs on the plants that support the larvae that eventually turn into caterpillars, which eventually turn into beautiful butterflies. This is the black swallowtail. And if the birds don't get it first, they'll be lucky. So that means the caterpillar has to eat an awful lot very quickly and then turn into a cocoon. They have to pupate into a cocoon. Caterpillars are really important for birds because they provide major sources of protein. So you have to, most of the time, the butterfly will put those larvae underneath a leaf for the most part. But you'll notice that this caterpillar on the right has really chewed off a large amount of this. It looks like it's a sweet pea that they eat. And here's an eastern swallowtail, a tiger swallowtail. There's all different types of butterflies. One thing too about moths that I didn't get a picture for that, moths are similar to butterflies in their ability to pollinate flowers and in their flight activities. They are more often colored in a muted fashion or tone, such as grays and tans, and they're predominantly flower pollinators at nighttime. Often their caterpillars cause extensive damage to specific plants. People think of moths as a negative thing, but moths are very excellent pollinators, especially for the plants that come out at nighttime. I know the moonflower. You have the Luna moth right here, which is beautiful. That moth is about with a wingspan can go up to 6 inches, believe it or not, and it's a beautiful, pretty green color, very light mint green. Think like a pollinator in planting your garden. You've heard that word pollinator over and over again. It's a real snap word, so to speak, and popular. I will name you what the pollinators are so you have an idea. And there's pictures of them right here in this garden on the exterior. They are birds, bees, butterflies, moths, hummingbirds, beetles, wasps, hornets, and flies. The bee species are the largest group of organisms that pollinate flowers because they feed only on flowers. The other organisms feed on other things besides flowers. What I suggest is that you plant appropriate things in growing a pollinator garden. That would be herbs. They love herbs, annuals, perennials, flowering shrubs, flowering vines, fruit trees, flowering trees, and native plants. By the way, the next person who will be speaking on the 23rd is going to cover native plants extensively. Paula is going to do a great job, and you'll learn an awful lot from her. You can look online for all kinds of pollinator gardens too. Isn't this a great picture on the right? Wouldn't everybody love to have a picture like that? It almost looks like it's not real, but it is. We're going to segue into birds. Now, birds themselves are yet another webinar all by themselves. So I'm going to talk very quickly and shortly about birds. Birds are a very important feature in our food chain and the energy pyramid. As you saw before, birds were the secondary producer. Everybody loves songbirds. They love to watch birds around a feeder, and they love to listen to their sounds. They do things, great things, like eat lots of insects for their protein and get rid of a lot of bad bugs as they go along. But they could cause damage to your fruit and nut trees, your flowers, your vegetables, your lawns even, because they do search for earthworms all over the place. And they can get into your house. Trust me, I've had that happen on more than one house occasion. But it's a small price to pay for the benefits they provide. I'm just pointing out the negative side about birds because birds can be a detriment in some ways because they can cause some damage. You need to ensure, and these are IPM ideas, you need to ensure that your house is in good repair, and you need to get rid of wood rot, which can harbor insects. What birds are looking for are the insects when they peck at your house. They'll come searching for the insects, especially early on in the season before it gets really warm. If you need one, there's a picture of a ceramic owl on the right that's kind of used like a scarecrow to a vegetable garden. It scares smaller birds, and it acts as a repellent. Birds can also build nests in your chimneys. They can peck holes in your house. What I suggest is that you call a professional wildlife control person who's licensed and knows about these animals. For gardens, when you have a vegetable garden, birds would love to come and peck. I know that they come to my fig trees and peck at them here and there. So sometimes it's a fight to the finish as to whether I get those figs pulled off before the birds peck at them. But they can build nests in your chimneys. They can peck holes, as I said. For gardens, you need to use netting, just proper netting, the really fine netting, especially on blueberry bushes, or a reflective spinner. There's a little picture right here of reflective spinners, which you can purchase, or you can make one of your own if you're a crafty person. Here are 5 ingredients for a bird-filled yard. I love these pictures. These were very good choices. There's 3 kinds of plants that a bird needs. Preferably native plants if you can find them, but you don't have to use 100% native plants. You need plants to support the insects, you need plants to produce seeds, and you need plants to produce berries. As an example, I'm going to just give you a few examples. The ones to support insects are the American holly, the barberry, dogwood, a Cotonie aster, and right here on the right-hand side, right here is the Ilex verticillata. It's a great plant. It has beautiful four-season interest, and this is a showy one in the wintertime when nothing else is in blooming. But once those berries are ripe, the birds know about it and they just take it away. But there's lots of insects on that one. The next group is the seed-producing plants, and those could be bachelor buttons, Mexican sunflower, which is known as Tithonia. Alyssum is a great one, cosmos, coreopsis, and sunflowers. Those are great seed producers. And the berry producers, usually the word berry is written as part of the name of the plant. As I said before, blueberries, or beautyberry, which is a great plant also, chokeberry, and mahonia. Mahonia is known commonly as the grape ivy, Oregon grape ivy. But mahoney can be very, very invasive, so you have to be aware of that. The source of water, that's the second thing that they need for a bird-filled yard. Bird baths, here's a picture of a bird bath right here that has a shallow bowl area. If you don't have a shallow bowl area, put some sort of rock that a bird can land on. Also, butterflies will land on that as well. And allow for the edge to be able to, the bird doesn't fall off. It needs to have the birds need to grasp with their feet. And most of all, change the water often. Number 3 is to provide cover from predators and resting places. Because of the fact that birds have so many predators, they're very wary and very skittish about where they go in your yard. One of the major types of plants are evergreens and dense shrubs to provide cover for not only predators, but as well as against weather conditions. Number 4 is to provide nesting boxes. We don't have a picture of a nesting box. Oh, well, that's true. That is a nesting box. I always think of it as a feeder, pardon me. It is a nesting box for bluebirds. And bluebirds are very specific, by the way, about their nesting boxes. You need to allow for dead vegetation matter to be around your property in order for them to build their nest wherever it is. So keep some leaf litter on the ground. Certain birds are ground feeders, and leaf litter is an important feature to those ground feeders. And last but not least, certainly, is to provide a chemical-free property. The less you use any chemicals, the more birds will flock to your yard, because you will have more available food sources as a result and shelter spaces. Now here's one of those middle ground organisms that I talked about. Bats are really, really an important feature because they consume huge amounts of flying insects, especially mosquitoes and flies. They also support the organic farmers that we have here in the United States by eating so many insects from their fruit trees and other plants. Really, really important. They may look scary, but they're not. The good IPM methods are to provide barriers. So that means closing your entryways into your house. Bats like to be up higher, so you have to make sure you look underneath shutters and make sure your louvered vents that you may have around the roof line of your house have intact screens. Very often those screens the bats will hang by their feet upside down, and eventually their bat droppings will cause the screens to decompose. So make sure you look for bat droppings and dirty holes where the bats may be coming in. The hole is just very small. It's the size of a quarter. It's very small. They can scrunch their bodies like hamsters do to become very, very tiny. Well, we do recommend that you could stuff stainless steel pads into the opening and caulk over it and then paint it. If you have an excessive infestation of bats, however, in your attic, be very careful. They can hibernate in your attic all winter. I would suggest that you contact a professional licensed wildlife control company. There are 15 species of bats in Georgia, even though there's 900 all around the world, but we only have 15. And they're not that prevalent. They're a good thing. Just remember that. Okay, the dreaded snake conversation. The only good snake is a dead snake is not the saying I want to hear out of anybody's mouth. Actually, snakes are wonderful, beneficial members of the food chain. Snakes can be found most anywhere. Most are shy, preferring to stay hidden, except when they come out to hunt. They often are just passing through your yard if they don't have a sheltered place or a food source to live with. This is a picture of two different common non-venomous snakes. Snakes eat other food sources such as fish, amphibians, birds, eggs, insects, and other snakes. And they eat, most importantly, all sizes of rodents. Without snakes, we would be overrun with rodents. There are a total of 40 species of snakes in Georgia, but only 6 are venomous. Food sources to other wildlife is a really important feature too. Hawks, great blue herons, falcons, peregrines, and owls are all snake attackers, snake predators. And the best way to prevent snakes from hanging around is, once again, our IPM application. It's called habitat modification. Remove where they hide or cover, and that includes wood piles, yard debris, etc. That also, water snakes are found in ponds, streams, and swamps. So be aware of that because they have a different place that they cover and hide in water. The most important thing, though, is if you remove the food source that they look for, which is rodents, then you won't have snakes hanging around in your yard. And as I said before, that was wood piles, it could be rock gardens, it could be brush piles, yard debris. And remember that ivy, once again, the dreaded ivy is the best cover for snakes. Ivy is also a place for mosquitoes to congregate. So if the rodents aren't around and have a place to hide, neither will the snakes be around. This is a contrast. This slide shows a contrast between 2 different types of snakes. One's a non-venomous corn snake, and he's really pretty in person, and the venomous copperhead. The reason why I chose this particular slide is to show you the difference between venomous and non-venomous snake. It's not always easy to tell, but venomous snakes will always have fangs. Well, you don't see that until they open their mouth. The most important thing that you can look at on the left, non-venomous snakes will typically have round pupils and egg-shaped heads. Can you see that? Right there. Notice their head is not the same shape as this. The venomous usually have a diamond-shaped head and slitted pupils. Very, very different, but there are exceptions to the rule. It's not always easy to identify the exact snake. Do you notice, by the way, the similarities of the color and the patterns of the scale? Mother Nature is just amazing. Here are pictures of 4 of the 6 venomous snakes that are found in Georgia. They are uniquely patterned according to their habitat, and they have different colors according to their habitat as well. Here's the cottonmouth, the coral snake, and 2 different types of rattlesnakes. I think they're beautiful, but if you have them around your property or they get inside your house, please call a licensed pest control. You don't want to mess with venomous snakes. And killing a venomous snake is not something that should be your jurisdiction. All right, guys, this is one topic that everybody always wants to know about. I always get questions about this. What do we do about deer? So it's finally time to talk about deer. I know almost everybody has had problems with deer. They are everywhere in the United States. We all love to look at this sweet creature. It's known as the Bambi notion, but they're a massive problem because we have created what we call an endless edge habitat while eliminating all deer predators in the urban and suburban environments through the years. That was a quote, by the way, from a book called Bringing Nature Home by Doug Tallamy. And here it is. Since he's written this book, he's written another book. He's a professor at a very learned professor at the University of Delaware. I've happened to have heard him 4 separate times already. And his mantra is to deal with the insects and then the birds will come, and live with wildlife and attempt to have less vegetation such as lawns, but encourage more native plants and trees and shrubs that will encourage regular wildlife to happen, the good stuff happen. So deers are herbivores, and since they're so successful in breeding, they eat lots of plants. They especially love our hostas, et cetera, et cetera. You can find a list. I'm popping down a little bit further. There's a wonderful list of deer-resistant plants that I won't go into right now because of time brevity. But this is the link to access the UGA publication on deer-resistant plants. I highly recommend it. The males of deer arrive around September through November, where the bucks aggressively remove the velvet coating from their antlers, and it causes major damage to tree bark. If that's the case, if you see this happening on your property, cover that base of your tree with loose-fitting paper cylinder, or better yet, chicken wire. That really helps an awful lot. And make sure that it's indestructible for the males to pull that off. You've got to really make sure it's held together well. The best deterrent for any deer problem is a fence, and that's an 8-foot fence. Sadly, often deer will impale themselves on the pointed posts of metal fences around people's neighborhoods at the height of 4 to 5 feet when they attempt to jump over the fence. And once they impale themselves, they can't get off. So there are different neighborhoods in the Atlanta and North Fulton area that have a real problem with deer. And they see this maybe once a week, especially at this time of the year. There's different kinds of fences that you can use, not just a plain old wooden 8-foot fence. They have solar powered electric fences, and there's a new kind of plastic deer fence that's used that I understand is very successful and is not so forcefully restrictive for you to be able to see out. So the other feature that may help on a temporary basis, but you need to be very, very resourceful, are the scent-filled repellents and the ceramic or cloth predator replica, which I'll show you in just a second. Also, thorny plants are really important. Usually deer don't go near thorny plants or plants that smell very strong, like rosemary and lavender. There's ways to go about it, and they're on the deer-resistant plant list. There is no such thing as a deer-proof plant. When the populations increase or when the fawns are growing, deer will eat whatever they can find, including thorny items, including smelly marigolds. So be aware of that. When they're hungry, they will eat. The best deer prevention, as I said, is an 8-foot fence. But if that's not possible, here's 2 decent products that can be used. They are both products that can be found easily from any big box store or online, and both must be reapplied every 2 to 3 weeks and after every single rainstorm. You need to be very vigilant if you're going to try and use those. I understand they can be very effective for a certain amount of time, and hopefully the deer won't eat your hydrangeas or your hostas every single year. This is a picture of a coyote replica. I know a couple different master gardeners in our group who have significant deer problem, and they seem to be effective. There are owl and hawk replicas as well to ward off other creatures that an animal fears. Make sure, though, that you move your replica around regularly. Deer are very smart animals and will recognize if the replica has not been moved very much. Rabbits. Oh, we love rabbits. Bunnies are so cute, but they've got a lot of problems with humans and on our property. First, the facts. Rabbits like to eat many of the same vegetation as deer, so choose your plants wisely. You can use the same list of deer-resistant plants as you do for rabbits. Number 2, most rabbits are eaten by predators. Others are killed by disease. Okay, thank you. And so there's a real problem about that because for rabbits, but the reason why they have so many babies is because they do have such a problem of predators and being killed by disease. They're very damaging to your plants. They're herbivores. and they seek shelter in other animals' holes in the ground. They can damage your shrubs, and they can eat the bark or the tender young shoots, and they love your vegetable garden. This is a great picture of a vegetable garden that is already carefully covered with chicken wire, so it protects the vegetable garden. The control methods are to allow the cat or dog to roam your yard. You can fence or use protective netting. And of course, the habitat modification. You remove the places where they hide, under the decks and the tall grasses. Really important. We move on. Squirrels, another nemesis to many people. Squirrels they may seem cute also, but they run, they jump, they climb, and they love to play with each other. They're still wild rodents, folks, and they can cause significant damage to your property. Because they burn up a lot of energy, squirrels need a constant amount of food in order to thrive. They are herbivores, and I've studied what it is that they eat. There's 4 types of squirrels. The most important issue is the fact that they damage and eat your plants, and they invade your home. They can be in basements or attics or chimneys. Don't feed them. That's the key, because if you feed them, you'll have more of an overpopulation in your area, and that's when they want to come inside because they've lost their habitat, where there's too many of them within their given environment. So discourage them with all sorts of things. The free food supply sets the scene for rampant overpopulation. If your area's food supply supports more squirrels, then they will be in your attic, unused chimney, or basement. Here's Chip from Chip and Dale, Disney movies. And Alvin the Chipmunks, aren't they cute? They are cute, but this is the third creature I've talked about. They are cute, but they're a member of the squirrel family, and they need protection in order to live around your property. They're not as invasive as squirrels, but they cause problems most often around the perimeter of your home. They undermine your driveway slabs, the foundation of your porches and front entranceways, and they'll dig up bulbs and eat them. They can be a real nuisance. They also eat dog food and bird seed. Please do not feed them either. Even they're cute, but don't feed them. You can, so what do we do about them? You can, by IPM methods, besides not feeding them, you can put out mothballs in their tunnels that they intentionally make, their moth or the burrows, and fill those burrows with pea gravel and mothballs. Now, mind you, mothballs shouldn't be used inside because it's made from a poisonous product called naphthalene. But as a repellent outside, it will work. There's no repellents registered for chipmunks, so good IPM practices are a must. And sealing those holes and vents and other openings in your house is really important to exclude that rodent with some caulking. Cute pictures again. They look cute, but we have pictures of raccoons and we have a picture of raccoons and opossums. They are similar organisms. I grouped these together because they're nuisances to the homeowner. Both are nocturnal and they are omnivores. They'll eat just about anything that they can come across. Raccoons prefer wooded areas near water sources because they don't have salivary glands. They'll eat pet food and garbage in the urban and suburban areas. They're creatures of opportunity and will raid your vegetable garden at the peak of ripeness. They may tear off shingles to access your attic. They can chew holes in walls and destroy the insulation in a big time way. They often build nests in chimneys, and they contract a number of diseases. So what can you do about them? You can secure garbage cans. The same kind of IPM methods apply to both species, by the way. You remove pet food from outside and secure the metal containers. You can consider electric fences. You can make sure your hen cages and pens are closed. You can trim the trees near the roof line. Very important to do that because they will climb in order to get up to that attic or that roof line. It's no fun when they start pulling off shingles. Opossums are nocturnal also, and they are the only U.S. marsupial that we have. They readily invade other animals' burrows or they climb trees. They do not attack. Neither do raccoons usually, but opossums look very scary because they have huge teeth. They show several different defense mechanisms like playing possum. and in order to forage for food, they have a habitual path in which to walk on a daily basis. Be careful of them. We're going to talk very quickly about roof rats and Norway rats, and then segue into mice. Rats are larger than mice. Norway rats are known as wharf rats, WHARF, or city rats. And roof rats are known as the country rat, so to speak. Roof rats prefer to nest in trees, and Norway rats like to live in burrows. That's the difference. But both types of rats multiply prolifically and socially live in packs of 8 to 10. They even have an alpha male, like coyotes and wolves do. They contaminate animal food and prefer fresh meat and grains to eat. Rats need more water than mice, which I never knew about, and are much smarter than mice. Rats are also what we call neophobic, meaning that they shy away from new objects. They have poor eyesight, but excellent senses of taste, smell, and touch. And they destroy your house and gnawing damage, through the word gnawing. They carry filth and diseases. There's 38 known diseases that we know about that rats carry. So what do we do about them? We go back to our IPM procedures. We try to remove their habitat and their sources of food. You keep your garbage cans tightly closed. You close all those entryways into your house, including floor drains. And you maintain a clean house. This is the only time we say maintain a clean house, because they like to really mess it up, and you'll see, and you'll have smells here and there. You make sure that your mesh screens that you have around the house are not damaged, especially the ones that have low windows. And outside, you would remove excessive underbrush and leaves. Rat poisons and mice poisons may not be the answer. We don't recommend that you put rat poisons in the attic, because if they die, it will cause about 4 weeks of a very putrid odor by their decaying bodies. And you may not know about that. Same thing is true for mice, but what they're doing is they're trying, because the poisons desiccate their bodies or dry them out, they go outside or they try to go outside to look for water, and it doesn't happen a lot of times. So keep your outside property very tidy. That means no old wooden board piles or underbrush, weeds, or lawn clipping piles. I have seen many a mouse or a rat in people's lawn clipping piles, believe it or not. Lawn clippings don't decay as quickly as other matter, especially in a compost pile. Make sure you locate, this is the signs for the rats and mice. I knew I was going to say that, rice and mats. Make sure you locate the rats or mice by finding the droppings, number one. You see any tracks or footprints, number two. You see the burrows outside, number three, or you find little holes with chewed edges. You can also hear scratching in the walls, especially at night. You can smell a musty odor. Mice really carry a musty odor with them for some reason, as opposed to rats. Or if you see or find any kind of chewed paper or carpet or clothing, such as fabric gloves, you may have a mouse there. Rats and mice are very persistent, and because they breed rapidly, it may take a few months to eradicate them from your property. So you have to be really vigilant. And I put this down as a laugh, because not everybody wants to do this. If all else fails, get a cat, because cats will try to use them and become predators, and we'll have to seek them out. There's the information about mice and what they're like. So what do? IPM, prevention of mice by way of proper sanitation within your home. Act immediately when you see a mouse infestation. You act immediately to prevent it from happening. And most of all, take away their food sources. You can make up traps. You can have lots of traps, but you need a lot of them. And make sure that you understand that mice run around against a wall. So you have to put the traps where they're going to be in order for them to be useful. Save the traps for later use, because you may have them come back. Also, talk to your neighbors about the fact that you have a mouse or rat infestation, because your neighbors may also. They usually go from one house to the next, to the next, to the next. and you can trap the critters together. The chance of a reinfestation will be minimized if you work together. Moles, not a very pretty looking animal, but it's a very biologically well-adapted animal to their lives underground. They actually swim basically through the soft earth with their very powerful front feet. I would not want to confront a mole with those feet. They're not that big though. They're insectivores and they eat beetles, spiders, grubs, and worms. Not just grubs, guys. They eat a lot of different kinds of insects. They tunnel just beneath the grass root line in the good soft soil. The damage caused by moles, as you can see by the picture, is really extensive, and your lawn may look like what I term as an airport underground runway. The landscape beds may have this happen to them too. They upheave they lift the plant material, and that causes the root systems to dry out. So what can we do? Well, trapping is the most effective control method. Don't overwater your lawns and landscape beds, and grub killers may not be the only effective solution. They could be only temporary. Moles are hard to get rid of, as are voles, which is the next item. Voles they look like a tiny little mouse, and they have a deep burrowing system where they reside, mostly in the wooded forest areas. They're herbivores, feeding on roots, leaves, and stems. They don't eat just roots. They eat lots of leaves and stems. If they run out of food or water, voles will resort to eating roots and tree bark. They also eat young garden plants, tubers, and bulbs. Because they're tiny, they have a real need for water as well. And because they're not good at getting to water, where they live is not usually around water. So here's our IPM solution. Prevention is the best cure. So you need to remove mulch and weeds, excess mulch and weeds. You also need to keep your lawn thatch down to reduce their habitat. And you can follow the deer-resistant plant list for these also because they like to eat tulips, just like deer do. So we suggest that, and they like hosta as well. So we suggest that you find alternative plant material to plant. And plant those favorite plants. If you can't help it, you need to have hostas and you have vole problems, put those hostas in containers, and they look beautiful. They will look beautiful if they're in the right spot. There are several higher level predators that eat voles if they can locate them. Voles are quick like mice, but they're very shy. We're almost done. I'm going to do a wrap up of the IPM practices for your yard. I think it's very important. And there are 7 different features. So I'm going to spit this out to you quickly so you understand. You can select, number 1, you select plants that are suitable for our climate, have low water requirements, and they don't need much fertilizer. And also naturally pest and disease resistant plants, such as native plants, for instance. Let's face it, good gardening takes lots of time, money, and energy. Number 2, practice your good gardening sanitation. That means make sure your tools are clean because they spread diseases. Good soil preparation is a must. That is critical. No matter what happens, you need to have good soil preparation. You also need to recognize how much mulch to use in your landscape beds. Remember, more is not better. Number 3, visit your garden frequently. I know that sounds strange, but you need to go out and walk around to discover any problems. Abstinence of using chemicals is important to all of our wildlife that visit your property. The less chemicals you have, the more you will have wildlife that you encourage or even discourage, but you'll have good wildlife more. You remove the infested or diseased plants, and please put them in the trash, not in your compost pile. Compost, by the way, is yet another topic we could talk about, but not now. Compost can be your best friend, actually. So just know that. And number 4, you recycle the leaves and other garden matter in your compost pile. Leaves are gold. Number 5, irrigate properly. If you water too much, it's going to cause problems. So I suggest that you water deeply and less often to encourage roots to grow deeper. Number 6, use organic mulches to retain moisture and prevent weeds. There's all different kinds of organic mulches. It is a personal preference. I know with my clients, I have that situation all the time of what color they want, but I try to make sure that they understand an organic mulch is very important. Then it will decompose and make your soil underneath much richer. And last but not least, learn to accept perfection. Patience is definitely a virtue, and a beautiful yard takes time to evolve. Remember that you need to live with it, and you need to live with wildlife that you may not necessarily like, but there's ways to handle it by good IPM practices. I had to put in, and this is a restriction of 15 plants that every yard should have, but this is my list. My list was originally about 50 plants. I pared it down to 15 and offered this slide to you as just some basics. These are tried and true plants. As an avid gardener, I have lots of plant material on my own property. But remember always that selecting the right plant for the right place and with wildlife in mind, the right reason. Finally, here's one of my favorite pictures, so to speak. You'll notice very carefully at this photo, it looks like a set of lungs, but the lungs are really made of trees. So and I think there's a path, and it's not a road, it's a regular walking path in between. Whatever you do to your little piece of the world has an impact on you inevitably. We are the environment. This statement is made by a man named Ian Somerhalder. He's a 42-year-old American actor and ecology activist. He launched a foundation in 2010 called the ISF, which is named after him, Ian Somerhalder Foundation, which aims to empower and educate people about animal life and their environment. Lastly, the final thing I want to say is there's no question that our Earth and its ecosystems are in trouble. We need to recognize and conserve our natural resources to save our planet and save our wildlife from becoming extinct. With almost 7 billion humans, we must learn how to live wiser among the wildlife. Thank you, and I think it's time for some questions. Mary?
Excellent, thanks, Marlysa.
Here's the references, by the way, and I will show you as you ask questions, I will also show you the books. All those books, well, let me go to that and I can turn back to it. Here's my many books, and all my books are from my own home library. I encourage you to take a genuine interest in learning more about your property by reading. And when I'm saying reading, pick up any garden book and devour it as though it were a New York Times bestseller. You'll learn a whole lot more.
So can you point out the book, Marlysa, can you point out the book that was specifically for plants for honeybees? There was a question around that.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry.
There you go, thank you.
Helps when I have that microphone down.
That's the only book I don't own, is the Xerces Society book. It's called 100 Plants. It's called 100 Plants to Beautify Your, 100 Plants That Bees Like, something like that.
Okay.
By the Xerces, Xerces Society. They have put out many different books. This one is 240 pages and it's beautiful.
Okay.
I just happened to see it and I want to get it. It's on my list of 100 plants to feed the bees. Thank you, Director.
Great. So
I have a lot of books here. You'll notice, books that have tips and lots of advice are worthy investment. The ones that say advisor or handy tips, problem solvers, those are good books to have also.
Okay, so we're going to take about 10 minutes to answer as many questions as we can, and any questions that are not answered, at the end of the series, we're going to have a frequently asked questions document, so everything that is not answered will be a part of that document. It will be part of our website.
One more book, excuse me, Mary, I don't mean to interrupt. This one's called 50 Beautiful Deer-Resistant Plants. Great pictures inside, really good book. And they are tried and true 50 beautiful plants. They are not only for the Southeast, okay? They are, the gentleman, the woman that wrote it is not from the Southeast, but you can use almost every single one of these plants in this area.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt.
All right. That's all right. Let's get the questions answered.
Yes, ma'am.
What Is Lorope grass, I think I'm saying that right.
Lorope.
Is that a mosquito hotel?
Absolutely. It certainly is. No question about it. The best way to handle Lorope is to chop it back. It's a great plant to just chop it back once or twice every year. It will flower depending upon the variety. It will flower. After it's flower, you need to chop it back that second time. But now is the time in February and March. If the squirrels and chipmunks have not chopped it back for you, or deer, because they often will eat it down to the nubs, which is great. There's one less thing to have to worry about maintaining. If they have not done that, you can take your lawnmower in a very high setting, or your weed whacker, and chop it down to like 2 inches. And it'll come back smelling like a rose. But
so we have successfully used Bob-X, but does that harm bees, birds, and butterflies?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Be very careful about anything like that. That is, and that is in my list, but I didn't have time to talk about that. There were 3 or 4 different types of insecticides and repellents that do work successfully, but I would be very careful. If you want to encourage to have bees, cancel it out. So find something else that's an alternative, and just remind yourself that you need to read the labels. If you don't know what the item is, you need to look it up while you're standing there at Home Depot or at a nursery when you're buying an insecticide. Insecticides can be extremely harmful. I've known people who have had mosquito control companies, for instance, that have sprayed just one time, and all of a sudden they have no more flowers for the rest of the season. And that's because they're potent. They're meant to be potent.
Okay. Do you know if wild birds eat fatsia berries?
If what kind of birds?
If birds eat fatsia berries.
I'm not sure. I have no idea, because I don't own any fatsias at this point in time. I do know the fatsias are a wonderful plant. They belong in predominant shade, and they'll, but I think the fatsia, they must though, because they do produce a lot of berries. We'll have to look that one up. My director will be looking at that while we're speaking. Continue.
Okay. What type of maintenance do you recommend for bird water baths to prevent mosquitoes?
Oh, a mosquito dunk. I point that out. You need to clean your bird bath out every 2 to 3 days, and make sure you have your bird bath close to a hose area so that you can fill it up on a regular basis. Birds they will not go near stagnant water at all. Plus, you'll have mosquitoes if you have stagnant water. But you need to have shallow bird baths, not heavy duty deep ones. And you need to make sure that the bird bath is edged, got some sort of edge that the bird can actually fling their little feet to, so they don't fall in. That's why I mentioned having a rock in the middle. That's a wonderful spot for a bird to go. And you can do a large rock. It doesn't have to be attractive. It just has to be above water level, so that the bird doesn't feel like it's going to fall in.
Okay. There's a question to go back, or request to go back to your slide with the recommended plants while we finish up the rest of these questions.
Sure. Which number slide was that? Let's see. Whoops. Okay. Whoops, that's not. I'm getting the wrong thing. You're gonna have to help me. Oh, thank you. There we go. 15 plants every yard should have. I know, I was a little quick on that. Perfect. If I were the one taking the many notes that I normally do, I would have asked the same question. These are just tried and true. As I said, I have, a ton of plants. All of these I have in my yard, actually. Fennel, by the way, is a perennial. Parsley is a biennial. In other words, you have to plant it every year to 2 years. And dill is an annual. With dill, you need to just buy the seeds. Don't buy the plant, because that's more expensive. Buy the seeds and scatter a handful of them in one spot. Have another area 3 weeks later and plant them, because dill will produce more and more dill. They need to be in full sun, and they do need a lot of water. But dill's a great plant to have for culinary purposes, as well as providing for caterpillars.
Okay. Let's see if we can get through the rest of these questions pretty quick. Do you recommend Milorganite around the garden edge to keep rabbits out?
Well, Milorganite is a wonderful product to put in as part of your soil. Hang on one second. Yeah, okay. We have an answer for the fatsia, by the way. Let me tell you this. They produce berries, most of which are eaten by, you said the berries, the birds. Okay, that's right. Milorganite can be used with, whenever I have pansies, I've learned not to put pansies out very often down in the ground. I can put them in higher containers, and it doesn't seem to be attacked by squirrels, chipmunks, or rabbits because they have to climb into that container. I use Milorganite. It is a very low level fertilizer, but it's made of sewage, dried sewage, came from Milwaukee, by the way. And it's the dried bacteria. Okay. Oh, that digests the sewage. Oh, I thought it was sewage. See, that's how little I know about Milorganite. That's because we have a Wisconsinner right here. So she knows because it came from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So there you go. Milwaukee, I would try it. And if it doesn't work, then just hang on to it and put it as part of your low-level fertilizer. It's really good to have. It's easy. It's granular. It's organic, and it feeds and provides micronutrients to the soil. So, but as far as rabbits are concerned, rabbits are tough, just like deer. Rabbits are in the same category as deer. I knew I'd have a lot of those questions.
Okay. How much cayenne pepper do you add to the bird feeder to repel the squirrels?
A lot, depending upon those squirrels, because squirrels can adapt. I know with my squirrels, I have one large feeder, and boy, oh boy, I have put in I've invested in all sorts of things, that coal, hot sauce stuff. I've used it from the coal company that makes bird seed. Oh my gosh, it doesn't matter to squirrels. If they're hungry, they're going to go for it.
That doesn't hurt the birds. Doesn't hurt the birds.
No, it does not. Birds have an immunity, so to speak. They cannot taste the heat of any bird seed.
Good to know.
There are many different kinds of bird seed that come already pre-bird, or that have had the hot sauce soaked in them.
I think I'll be going to Costco to get some bulk cayenne pepper.
Oh yes, that's where I go.
Yeah. What do you use to keep chipmunks from eating your garden?
Chipmunks don't eat that much from your garden but when they're hungry, they will forage for food. Chipmunks are the same situation as squirrels. When they're hungry, they will go for anything, especially if they're having babies. The most important thing is the IPM item, which is to get them off your property and to find their burrows and fill it with pea gravel, as well as those. And you can put the naphthalene mothballs in there, not a ton, but mix it in with your pea gravel, and they'll be gone for a while. They may come back because they're very persistent. They have to have a place to live. One of the main things about chipmunks, though, is they undermine areas around the foundation of your house and your driveway. And then after they start digging underneath there, because they're looking for food to eat, it's not just to dig for digging purposes. They're always looking for food sources. They're very, very busy little animals, and they do prolifically create more, and they breed in the summertime 2 or 3 different litters. So they're busy, and whenever an animal is busy like that and breeding, they're going to be looking for more food. So that's the drawback with chipmunks.
Okay. One more. I was trimming my Laura Pedlum yesterday, and there was a brown bat with black in its wing, and it looked like it had some white in its face. Do you have any idea what kind of bat that is?
They're called brown bats. Yes.
There you go.
It's the most common of the 15 bats that we have, 15 varieties that we have in Georgia. Okay. It's only 15. Most bats are found in the tropics and the Caribbean, but internationally there are 900 different types of bats. So,
okay. All right. So
good thing.
That's all the questions that you didn't actually answer as part of your presentation. So I think that would conclude all the questions.
Very good. Thank you, Mary, so very much. I want to thank you all for coming and listening to me, and make sure that you take a look at the references, give us a survey, because we request that survey. And don't forget about on Tuesday will be Paula Lindsay's class on native plants. She'll actually even more elaborate even more and probably provide some good lists to you too about what those native plants are and where you can find them. Thank you all for coming and have a wonderful evening. Happy gardening.